They say Christmas is the season of giving, but what do you do when the only thing your family gives you is abandonment? My name is Sarah Hughes, and I'm 78 years old. 3 years ago, I buried my husband of 52 years. Last Christmas Eve, I thought I'd finally feel whole again, surrounded by the children I raised and the grandchildren I adored. Instead, I found myself alone in a cold, empty parking lot at midnight, clutching my purse and wondering how the people I loved most in the world could leave me behind as if I were nothing more than an afterthought. Before we dive back in, let us know where you're tuning in from. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button because tomorrow, I've got something even more special lined up just for you. Sarah Hughes sat alone in her quiet home, feeling the familiar emptiness that had followed her ever since her husband, Ronald, had passed away. She had always been the devoted wife, mother, and grandmother, but now, as she entered her later years, she felt the weight of isolation press heavily on her heart. Her children, Jennifer, Michael, and David, had drifted away after Ronald's death. They visited occasionally but seemed more like strangers than family. Their distance became painfully evident during a recent shopping trip when Sarah was abandoned in a mall parking lot, left to find her way home after her children had walked off without her. The incident left Sarah feeling betrayed and confused. For years, she had been the one to take care of others, but now, when she needed her family the most, they had turned their backs on her. The rejection was compounded by their refusal to acknowledge the reality of the situation, insisting that Sarah was simply confused, that it was just a misunderstanding. As the days passed, Sarah wrestled with the deep hurt caused by her children's behavior. She began to question whether their indifference was a result of her own failures as a mother, wondering if she had done something wrong. The sadness she felt was overwhelming, but it also stirred something within her, a desire for change, for something more than the isolation she had settled into. One day, as Sarah sat in her living room, her thoughts drifted to the future. She thought about the years she had left, about the legacy she would leave behind. It wasn't just about money or material things. She realized it was about relationships, about creating connections with people who valued her. As she reflected, Sarah felt a spark of hope. She didn't want her legacy to be defined by the abandonment she had suffered, but by the choices she made moving forward. She wanted to surround herself with people who appreciated her for who she was, not just for what she could give. Her thoughts were interrupted by a call from her old friend, Margaret, a lawyer who had helped Sarah with her legal matters in the past. Margaret suggested that Sarah should meet with her again, especially given her growing concerns about her estate and the changes she felt were necessary. Sarah agreed, knowing that it was time to take control of her life and her future. The next week, Sarah sat across from Margaret in her office, discussing plans to update her will. Margaret listened intently as Sarah explained her desire to set up a foundation, one that would help elderly people who, like her, felt abandoned by their families. Sarah also considered setting aside a portion of her estate to benefit people who had shown her true kindness, like Marcus, the grandson of her friend Rosa, whom she had recently met. Rosa was an inspiring woman, small in stature but mighty in heart. She had raised Marcus as her own, providing him with love and stability after the tragic loss of his parents. Rosa's life had been a testament to selflessness and compassion, values that Sarah longed to embrace. Sarah's budding friendship with Rosa and Marcus made her realize that family wasn't just about blood. Family could be chosen, and it was through this realization that Sarah began to rebuild her life. As Sarah continued to draft her plans, she felt a growing sense of purpose. She wanted her will to reflect her new understanding of family and love, to reward kindness and respect, and to help those who treated others with dignity. It wasn't about punishing her children. It was about rewarding the behavior she wished to see in the world. But she also knew that the decision would likely cause conflict with her biological children, and that weighed heavily on her mind. On the drive home from Margaret's office, Sarah felt a sense of clarity. She knew the path ahead would be difficult, but it was the right path. She was finally ready to live life on her own terms, surrounded by people who truly saw her for who she was, not just who they thought she should be. The following weeks were filled with decisions and preparations. Sarah met with her attorney Margaret to formalize her plans. She was determined to create something that would outlast her, something that would honor the values of kindness, compassion, and respect that had guided her through life. It was an effort to turn the pain of abandonment into a source of purpose. She set up the Sarah Hughes Foundation, a charity designed to support elderly individuals who felt forgotten, just as she had felt in the wake of her children's neglect. She also knew that her changes to her will would likely shock her children. Jennifer, Michael, and David had always expected to inherit a large portion of her estate, but that was no longer the case. Sarah had decided that they would receive only token amounts, just enough to acknowledge they had not been forgotten, but not enough to enable the entitlement that had fueled their abandonment. Her main bequests would go to the foundation and to people like Marcus and Rosa, who embodied the love and respect she felt her children had failed to provide. As Sarah worked through the logistics of her will, something shifted within her. She felt less like a victim of her circumstances and more like an architect of her own future. The interactions with Marcus and Rosa had opened her eyes to what a real family could be, a group of people who cared not out of obligation, but out of genuine affection. Sarah's relationship with Marcus deepened over time. He had been like a son to her in the way he cared for her, but also in how he saw her for who she truly was. He had been there for her after the mall incident, when her own children had failed to show up, and had quietly supported her as she worked through her pain. Rosa had become a trusted friend, someone who made Sarah laugh and feel valued in ways she hadn't felt in years. When Marcus invited Sarah to dinner at Rosa's assisted living facility, it marked the beginning of a new chapter for her. The evening was warm and full of conversation, a stark contrast to the cold, uncomfortable interactions Sarah had with her biological children. Rosa, with her years of wisdom and experience, had the ability to make Sarah feel welcome and appreciated. It was a night of healing, one that filled Sarah's heart with gratitude. As the months passed, Sarah found herself looking forward to her visits with Rosa and Marcus. She had become a regular at Sunset Manor, and those dinners became the highlight of her week. For the first time in a long time, she felt a part of something real, a community that valued her presence. Sarah's children, on the other hand, remained distant. She hadn't heard from them much since the mall incident, and when Jennifer did reach out, it was only to offer a polite inquiry about her well-being. That hurt, but it also gave Sarah a sense of clarity. She had spent so many years trying to please them, to make them proud, only to be met with indifference and judgment. She realized that the time had come to stop seeking their approval. She had given so much of herself, but it had never been enough. Now, she would focus on building a future that reflected her values, not theirs. One evening, Marcus called Sarah with news that shook her to the core. Rosa had been diagnosed with early-stage dementia. Although the diagnosis wasn't a surprise, Rosa had been experiencing forgetfulness and confusion. It was still a blow. Sarah's heart ached for her friend, who had been so strong, so giving her whole life. But Marcus, true to his nature, was determined to be there for Rosa every step of the way. He promised to care for her as long as he could, even as the demands of her condition became increasingly challenging. It was during this time that Sarah knew without a doubt that her decision to include Marcus and Rosa in her will was the right one. She couldn't change what had happened with her children, but she could change how she spent the rest of her life. She could choose to invest in relationships that uplifted her, that reminded her of the value of true family. Rosa's health continued to decline slowly, and Sarah was by her side through every appointment, every hospital visit. She helped Marcus research the best memory care facilities and supported him in the tough decisions he had to make. As she did so, she found herself reflecting more on her own choices and the family she had created through her actions, not her bloodlines. There was love here, real love. Love that didn't require earning or deserving, but simply existed because of mutual respect and care. At the same time, Emma, Sarah's granddaughter, was thriving. Emma had grown into a compassionate young woman, and Sarah was proud of her. When she heard that Emma had been accepted into several prestigious universities, she knew that Emma deserved more than the financial struggles that would come with a high-caliber education. Sarah, having restructured her will to include educational scholarships in the future, had the perfect solution. She created the Hughes Family Values Scholarship Program, offering full tuition to students who met certain criteria: volunteer work with elderly populations, essays on the importance of family, and an interview to assess their character. Emma was the perfect candidate for the scholarship, and Sarah felt a sense of hope. Despite the struggles with her children, perhaps the values she had worked so hard to instill were still present in the next generation. Emma, who had worked with the elderly for years, was exactly the kind of young person Sarah hoped to encourage. As the winter months passed, Sarah's life continued to evolve. She became more involved with the foundation, watching it grow into something meaningful that would impact families like Marcus's. She also spent more time with Emma, who was blossoming into a young adult with a clear sense of purpose. They spoke often about Emma's studies, her volunteer work, and the scholarship, and Sarah felt proud to see her granddaughter flourish. But even as Sarah embraced the new relationships in her life, the shadow of her children's rejection still lingered. She had no illusions that things would ever return to the way they once were. The damage was too deep. But she had finally realized something important. She didn't need to rely on them for her happiness. She could build a life surrounded by people who genuinely valued her. And that was a gift. One evening, Marcus and Sarah sat together, talking about the future and the ways they could continue to grow the foundation. Rosa, though struggling with her health, still had a sharp mind at times. One day, during a rare moment of clarity, Rosa pulled Sarah aside and spoke with a seriousness that made Sarah stop and listen. "I want you to promise me something," Rosa said, her voice clear. "When I'm gone, don't let Marcus forget that he deserves to love and be loved. He's spent so much time taking care of me that he's forgotten how to live for himself. Promise me you'll help him find happiness again." Sarah promised, knowing that it was one of the most important commitments she could make. As spring approached, Sarah's life began to settle into a rhythm that felt meaningful and fulfilling. Her work with the foundation flourished, helping families who were in situations similar to Marcus and Rosa's. Her involvement provided her with a sense of purpose that had been absent for so many years. In every new connection she formed, Sarah felt as though she was finally building the life she had always wanted but had never been able to create before. Marcus continued to care for Rosa, his devotion unwavering even as the demands of caregiving became more intense. Sarah admired his resilience and was proud of how he'd turned his own hardships into a source of strength for others. She often reminded him of what Rosa had once said: he deserved love, and his life couldn't solely be defined by his role as a caregiver. It wasn't easy, though. The struggles of balancing his personal life and the heavy responsibility of caring for his grandmother weighed on him. One evening, Sarah invited Marcus over for dinner to talk about something that had been on her mind. She knew he had been making sacrifices, working less, spending long hours at the memory care facility, and it was taking a toll. "Marcus," Sarah began gently, "have you thought about finding some balance? You deserve time for yourself too, not just to care for Rosa." Marcus sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't even know where to start, Mrs. Hughes. I've given so much of myself to her, and I don't want to let her down. But I know I can't keep going like this." Sarah placed a hand on his. "You don't have to go it alone. I'm here for you, and so is Claire." She smiled softly, knowing that Claire, the physical therapist Marcus had started seeing, was someone who truly understood his heart and his commitment to family. "I see how much you love Rosa, but she also wants you to be happy. Don't forget to live for yourself too." Over the next few months, Marcus began taking small steps toward caring for himself, with Claire's gentle encouragement and Sarah's support. He started exercising again, picking up old hobbies he'd left behind, and occasionally, he would meet Sarah for a quiet walk in the park to clear his mind. It wasn't easy to break old habits, but it was a start, and he knew that Rosa would want him to be happy. Meanwhile, Emma was adjusting to life at college and continued to volunteer with the elderly at a nearby nursing home. She had taken full advantage of the scholarship Sarah had established for her, and it gave Sarah peace to know that her granddaughter was thriving. Their conversations grew deeper with every phone call. Emma shared her passion for advocating for the elderly, and Sarah could hear the sincerity in her voice. She was exactly the kind of young woman Sarah had hoped to nurture through the foundation. One evening in early May, Emma called with exciting news. "Grandma Sarah, I've been accepted to an internship program this summer. It's with an organization that focuses on improving quality of life for seniors in nursing homes." "I'm so excited." Sarah's heart swelled with pride. "I'm so proud of you, Emma. You're doing incredible work, and I know this internship is just the beginning of a meaningful career. You're going to change lives." Their relationship had blossomed into something Sarah had once thought was out of reach with her own children. Emma was a reminder that love, when nurtured, could be passed down through generations. Sarah knew that despite her strained relationship with her children, she could still have a positive impact on the next generation, and that gave her hope. But even as Emma thrived, Sarah's reflections on her children became more complex. Jennifer, Michael, and David still didn't fully understand the extent of Sarah's decisions. After nearly a year of minimal contact, Jennifer reached out again, this time in a more unexpected way. It was mid-June, and Sarah had been spending most of her time at the foundation or with Marcus and Rosa. The phone rang one evening, and it was Jennifer. "Hi, Mom." Jennifer's voice sounded hesitant, as though unsure of how to proceed. "I've been thinking about everything, and I know I've made mistakes. I want to apologize for how things have been between us. I've realized I haven't been the kind of daughter I should have been, and I'm sorry for that." Sarah's heart ached. She had waited so long to hear these words, but now that they were finally spoken, they came mixed with all the pain of the years they had lost. She had spent so much time grieving over her children's actions, but hearing Jennifer's apology brought a sense of closure. "Thank you for saying that, Jennifer. It means a lot," Sarah replied quietly. "I think we both have a lot of work to do if we're going to rebuild our relationship. But we can't change the past, only move forward." Jennifer's voice softened. "I know. I just don't want to lose you. I'm ready to work on this." The conversation was difficult, but it marked the first step in what would be a long, slow process of healing. Sarah was still wary, still unsure if things could truly change, but she was willing to consider the possibility that reconciliation, though painful, could one day be achieved. It was a step forward, albeit a small one. Sarah spent the following months working on reconciling her relationship with her children while continuing to build her life with Marcus, Rosa, and Emma. She spent long hours at the foundation, deepening its reach and impact on the community. She organized events, fundraisers, and initiatives to support elderly people who had been overlooked by their families, just as she had once felt. Through all this, her health remained stable, though at 80, she was more mindful of the toll time had taken. Each day felt like a gift, and she embraced every moment, knowing that the choices she made in these later years were shaping her legacy. The final chapter of Sarah's life was far from what she had once imagined. It was no longer defined by the rejection and heartache of her past, but by the love and respect she had found in people like Marcus, Rosa, and Emma. Family, she had learned, was not just about blood, it was about connection, commitment, and respect. One crisp autumn evening, as Sarah walked through the park with Marcus, she stopped to admire the changing leaves. The golden hues of the trees reminded her of the richness of life, of the layers of experiences that had shaped her. She thought about the days when she felt invisible, dismissed, abandoned by her children. But those days were behind her now. She had built something new, something that gave her the peace she had longed for. As Marcus walked beside her, a soft smile tugged at her lips. "I never thought I'd feel this way again," she said, her voice filled with contentment. "For the first time in years, I'm truly at peace." "You deserve that peace, Mrs. Hughes," Marcus replied, his voice steady and full of warmth. "You've earned it." Sarah's heart swelled with pride. She had spent her life caring for others, trying to hold everything together. But now, in her final years, she had finally found the freedom to live for herself, to choose who to love and who to trust. It was a lesson she had learned the hard way, but it was one she would pass on to others through the work of the foundation and the legacy she had built. The legacy of someone who chose to value herself, someone who finally understood that love, when it was real, should never come with conditions. As the days passed into winter, Sarah found herself increasingly settled in the life she had carefully crafted for herself. The foundation continued to grow, thanks in no small part to the hard work of volunteers like Marcus and Claire. The work they did made a tangible difference, and Sarah couldn't help but feel immense pride in the way her vision had unfolded. Every week brought new challenges, but with them, new victories, each one a testament to her strength and commitment. Her relationship with Marcus and Rosa had evolved into something truly special. It was more than family. It was a bond formed through shared values and mutual respect. When she looked at them, she no longer felt alone. Their connection was something she never thought she'd experience after her estrangement from her children. Marcus had become the son she had always hoped for, and Rosa was the mother figure she had longed to have in her life. They were the foundation of her new family. Rosa, despite her advancing age and worsening dementia, had moments of clarity that were nothing short of miraculous. She continued to recognize Sarah, and even in her confusion, Rosa's wisdom and love shone through. One afternoon, as Sarah sat beside Rosa's bed at Willowbrook, the older woman reached out and grasped Sarah's hand tightly. "Mija," Rosa said, her voice soft but filled with emotion. "You are my family now. No matter what happens, promise me you'll never forget that." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes, but she smiled through them. "I won't forget, Rosa. You've given me more than I could ever repay. You've shown me what love and family really mean." Rosa squeezed her hand, her eyes soft with affection. "You have a good heart, Sarah. Don't let anyone make you forget it." Sarah sat in quiet reflection, knowing that despite the pain of her past, she had found a kind of family she could rely on, a family built on love, not obligation. As the months wore on, Sarah felt her connection with her biological children slowly unraveling further. Jennifer and the others were still distant, still in their own worlds, and the relationship she once hoped to rebuild remained strained. Despite the occasional phone call from Jennifer or a brief text from Michael or David, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they only reached out when it was convenient for them. She no longer expected them to change. But there was Emma. Her granddaughter was growing into an incredible young woman, and their bond deepened every time they spoke. Emma had even started coming to Sarah's house regularly on weekends, often bringing friends from school who shared her passion for helping the elderly. Emma had become a true ally for Sarah in her mission to bring awareness and support to those who often went unseen, just like Sarah had felt for so many years. One afternoon, while Sarah was sitting with Emma, they were talking about the future. Emma's future, mostly. She had recently decided to pursue a career in social work, focusing on geriatric care. Sarah was proud, but she also worried about the toll that the career would take on Emma. Emma's heart was big, and Sarah feared she might end up sacrificing too much of herself, just as Marcus had done for so long with Rosa. "Grandma Sarah," Emma said, looking up from her notes as she sat across from her. "I've been thinking a lot about what you've taught me. I want to make a difference in the world, but I don't want to burn out. I want to be there for others, but I also want to take care of myself. How did you do it?" Sarah smiled, remembering her own struggles. "You have to find balance, sweetheart. It's so easy to lose yourself when you're focused on helping others, but you can't pour from an empty cup. Take time for yourself, just like you take time for others. The work you'll do is important, but so are you. You have to value yourself enough to protect your own peace." Emma looked at her, a thoughtful expression on her face. "I will, Grandma. I promise." It was moments like this that reminded Sarah of the incredible impact she could still have, even after everything. She had instilled in Emma the same values of empathy and kindness that had once been her guiding light. And while her relationship with her biological children was still fractured, she found solace in knowing that her grandchildren would carry these values into the future. The Christmas season arrived once more, and it was a time Sarah had mixed feelings about. She had always loved the holidays, but the past few years had been marked by solitude and strained relationships. This year, however, she was filled with a sense of anticipation and excitement. The dinner she had planned with Marcus, Claire, and a handful of her closest friends felt like a rebirth of sorts. She no longer feared the holidays, no longer felt the deep ache of exclusion. Instead, she was looking forward to a celebration that felt authentic and true. On Christmas Eve, Sarah's house was alive with laughter and the smell of delicious food. The table was set, the fire crackled in the hearth, and the warmth of good company filled the air. Marcus and Claire arrived first, followed by Emma, who had driven down from college to join them. It felt right, like a family forged in the fires of experience and choice, not obligation. Sarah sat at the head of the table, a quiet smile playing on her lips. She looked around at the people who had come to mean so much to her. These were the people who had shown her love, respect, and loyalty when she needed it most. This was family, real family. And for the first time in years, Sarah felt truly at home. As they all gathered around the table, Sarah raised her glass for a toast. To chosen family, she said, her voice strong. To the people who see us for who we really are and love us anyway. To the bonds we've built and the love that fills our lives. I'm so grateful for all of you. There were cheers and laughter, and for that one evening, all of Sarah's doubts and regrets faded away. She was surrounded by people who valued her, who understood the true meaning of family. It was everything she had once hoped for. Later that night, as the guests departed, Emma stayed behind to help Sarah clean up. "Grandma Sarah," she said softly, "I want to thank you for everything. For showing me what real love looks like. For teaching me the value of family, no matter how it's made." Sarah felt a lump form in her throat, and she wrapped her arms around her granddaughter. "You've taught me just as much, Emma. You've reminded me that love, respect, and kindness can survive, even in the face of rejection. You're the proof that even after all the hurt, there's still hope." As Emma hugged her tightly, Sarah felt something inside her shift, like a weight lifting from her chest. The ache of the past was still there, but it no longer defined her. The woman she had become, the woman who valued herself and built a life of purpose, had finally found peace. And for the first time in years, Sarah knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. The months continued to pass, each one carrying Sarah further into the life she had built with intention and strength. The foundation had grown, touching more lives than Sarah had ever anticipated. It became a beacon of support for families facing the challenges of caring for elderly loved ones, just as she had learned firsthand. She could see the impact of her work in the smiles of caregivers who were able to provide better lives for their parents, in the children who learned what true family meant. It was early spring when she received a letter that would mark the next chapter in her journey. The Hughes Family Values Scholarship Program had not only been successful, but it had grown into something more than she had ever dreamed. She'd set out to create something that would reward compassion and care, and it had done just that. Emma had thrived in college, and her dedication to serving the elderly had made Sarah so proud. But it wasn't just Emma. Other students who shared similar values had also been positively impacted by the scholarship, and Sarah felt a deep sense of satisfaction in knowing that the legacy she was leaving was one of compassion and respect. One evening, after a long day of foundation work, Sarah sat down at her kitchen table with a cup of tea. The world outside was still and quiet, and as she watched the snow fall lightly on her garden, a sense of calm washed over her. She thought about everything she'd been through, the pain of her children's abandonment, the fear and loneliness she had felt, and the decision to walk away from relationships that no longer served her. She had spent so many years trying to fix the things that had gone wrong, trying to make her children see her as she truly was. But now she understood. It wasn't about fixing the broken relationships with her children. It was about healing herself. The phone rang, breaking her reverie. She picked it up, her heart quickening slightly when she saw it was Marcus. He'd become like a son to her in so many ways, and their weekly dinners together had become a cherished routine. "Mrs. Hughes," Marcus said, his voice sounding slightly strained, "I need to talk to you about something." "It's about Rosa." Sarah's heart tightened. Rosa's health had been declining for some time now, but the last she'd heard, the situation wasn't immediately life-threatening. "What's going on?" Sarah asked, concern filling her voice. "It's her dementia," Marcus said. "She's been having a lot of episodes recently, and the doctors are concerned. They think it might be progressing faster than we thought." Sarah felt a pang of worry. Rosa had always been a fighter, a woman full of strength and dignity, but now, it seemed that even her resilience was being tested. "Is she okay?" Sarah asked softly, her mind racing. "Not really," Marcus admitted. "She's scared, Mrs. Hughes. She keeps apologizing for needing help, for being a burden. And it's breaking my heart to watch. Sarah paused, feeling the weight of Marcus's words. She could see the resemblance between him and Rosa so clearly now. The same tenderness, the same selflessness. You're not alone in this, Marcus, she said firmly. We'll figure this out together. Rosa is a treasure, and she deserves the best care we can give her. Thank you, Mrs. Hughes. You've been so good to us. I don't know what I would do without you. You don't have to do it alone, Sarah replied. You've done so much for Rosa, and I'll do whatever I can to help. We'll make sure she's comfortable and well cared for. As she hung up the phone, Sarah felt a deep sense of gratitude wash over her. In many ways, she had found a new family, one that had nothing to do with biology, but everything to do with love, respect, and choice. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. In the weeks that followed, Sarah threw herself into helping Marcus with Rosa's care. She attended doctor's appointments, researched memory care facilities, and sat with Rosa during testing procedures. It was a labor of love, and while it was exhausting, it never once felt like a burden. There was something deeply fulfilling in caring for someone who had cared so much for others in her lifetime. One afternoon, while visiting Rosa in her new facility, Sarah sat beside her friend's bed, holding her hand as they talked. The confusion that had marked Rosa's condition seemed to lift for a brief moment, and Sarah saw the spark of recognition in her eyes. Sarah, Rosa said, her voice clear, promise me something. Anything, Sarah replied, her voice thick with emotion. When I'm gone, promise me you'll help Marcus find someone to love. Rosa's voice was gentle but firm. He's given so much of himself to me, but he needs to live his own life too. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she squeezed Rosa's hand. I promise, Rosa. I'll make sure he knows he deserves love too. Rosa smiled, her eyes soft with the wisdom of someone who had lived a full, rich life. You're a good woman, Sarah. Don't ever forget that. As the weeks turned into months, Sarah found herself reflecting more and more on Rosa's words. Marcus had dedicated so much of his life to caring for his grandmother that he had neglected his own needs. Sarah saw the weariness in his eyes, the exhaustion from balancing his job with his duties as a caregiver. She encouraged him to take time for himself, to date, to build a life outside of the hospital visits. She reminded him, as she had reminded herself, that love was about balance. It wasn't just about giving, it was about receiving, too. One evening, after a particularly difficult visit to the hospital, Marcus called Sarah. I've been thinking, he said, his voice tentative. I've met someone. Her name's Claire, and she works at the rehabilitation hospital. Sarah's heart swelled with pride. She could hear the shift in Marcus's tone, the hope in his voice. That's wonderful, Marcus, she said warmly. You deserve someone who understands what you've been through and can help you carry that load. Don't feel guilty for loving again. Rosa would want you to be happy. Marcus paused for a moment before speaking again. Thanks, Mrs. Hughes. I don't know what I'd do without you. You're not alone, Marcus, Sarah replied softly. Remember that. As the spring progressed, Sarah's life continued to evolve. She remained involved in the foundation, worked on expanding its programs, and found herself becoming increasingly involved in the lives of people who shared her values. Emma had become a bright spot in her life, and their bond only deepened as the young woman continued to excel in her studies and work with the elderly. And then, one day, Sarah received the news she had been waiting for. Emma had been awarded the Hughes Family Values Scholarship. Sarah felt a profound sense of pride as she read the email, knowing that the values she had tried to instill in her children, and had passed down to Emma, were now being embraced by the next generation. Emma's success was a testament to the power of love, commitment, and the lessons learned through hardship. By the time summer arrived, Sarah's life was full in a way it never had been before. She had built a family not based on blood ties, but on the love and respect that flowed freely between her, Marcus, Claire, Rosa, and Emma. These were the people who truly saw her. They knew her heart. They loved her not because they had to, but because they wanted to. As Sarah sat in her living room one evening, reflecting on the choices she had made, she felt a deep sense of peace. It hadn't been an easy road, and the pain of her past still lingered in her heart, but she had learned that true family wasn't something you inherited, it was something you created. And Sarah Hughes had created a family that would stand the test of time.